Okay, so it's late, but I'm gonna record just a little dev diary of what I've been doing today. So I've been working on RL Timeline, and I kind of want to keep track of progress on things, and as I learn things for, I don't know, for whatever reason, for later reference. So I've been keeping this note stock, which is kind of nice. But I coded basically all of this today. I even like prepared a new sample data set for it. So what this will eventually hopefully look like is I don't even need to do that. I can just go 01 web demo Kenobi. So this is a mock-up, basically static mock-up that I made forever ago, and you can see it's really pretty. Like, I put a lot of effort into the CSS, but so this is based in CSS Grid, which is not ideal. And it's not very precise, but you can kind of see the general concept. It's basically you have the players, you have the teams that they're on, and you follow them through time, right? And you can kind of see where other players go. That's the idea, is to show everything in context. But the idea of implementing this in D3 is to do this on a massive scale. So to show the entire esports scene, basically every single team, and you can drag through it and like click through and manipulate the data. So this has been a project. I initially planned to use this project to learn D3, but I tried and I didn't really get around to, I don't know, it's just like, it's such a not straightforward thing. Like, there's no tutorial that's going to tell you how to do this. So I didn't end up learning that much from it, but when or for a while before, but then I worked on actually building a charting library in D3, as a different project. And obviously then, I'm implementing like every kind of graph, but they're all like super, the tutorials are all there. But I wanted to style it a certain way, or take in parameters a certain way. So I definitely learned a lot that way, just bashing out tons of graphs. And that led me here. So I took a break from that project, which is not complete, but we're making progress, and or not making progress, but we're nearing completion. We've done a lot on it. So I took a break to revisit this old project, and there's a couple parts of this old project. The D3 part, I would say, is I even put this aside earlier for I had been building a scraper, which I had done in Python, and this actually takes data straight from the Rocket League Wikipedia, the wiki, which has absolutely all information on it, right? If we just go to like Wikipedia Rocket League, so this is a page I'd scrape off of. So I scraped this timeline right here, and here you go. Like, this is somewhat easy to turn into structured data. Certainly the date and description and links and such. But to parse this into parsing this as like, there's a couple types of events that I've defined. So what the sample data that I've come up with, as for like what I wanted to what it looked like eventually, looks like this, right? So we have a date, that's easy to get. Team is also somewhat easy to get. I mean, you could just use the team thing, but whatever, and you get all the players on the team, which is sometimes specified and sometimes not. So this will just have to be kind of generated. And then we have but type, and then things like identifying who's leaving, joining, splitting up into different events. That's going to be a little hard, because you can see even here it's not the most consistent, right? And if you just look at, sometimes there's like a long message or a long thing that'll have like multiple things at once, especially in like the older, less well maintained, I guess, less standardized ones, where you see you have like that, you have multiple things on one line. So what I want to do there is keywords will probably fail. I'll have to do some sort of NLP processing, which is actually really cool, because NLP is just cool. And I've made as far as I got on that, so you can see there's like JavaScript and Python files. I tried to do this whole thing in JavaScript, but and it was fine for scraping, obviously, but for NLP I just bottlenecked hard. Like, I could not find a good NLP library that did what I wanted to. But Python, on the other hand, is super nice, right? There's I think it's called NTLK and NLTK, which is big juggernaut, like amazing library, right? And then I'm using Spacey, which is supposedly a good amount better and lighter, and easier to use. But as you can see, I've made no progress on it. I have some idea of what I want to do, which is separating it into like this linguistic, the tree thing, and identifying subject noun, and figuring all that out. But whatever, that's that. I haven't made much progress. But okay, this dev diary. Yeah, that's a long introduction. But what I've been working on now is this thing right here. So this is what the actual timeline will end up looking like. So okay, you look at this. This is like clearly it's not nearly as pretty, but this is if you look in the console here, it's doing a hell of a lot more than what the static thing I coded before was doing, because what this is doing is it's taking in this data file and just generating it all from these events, right? So it's all auto-generated and just from events, and with all these teams, you can see it has its scale and it's zoomable, right? So zooming and just updating data, that's something I haven't done really in D3 at all. So I had to learn a lot of that today. When I started out, it was the first thing I learned today was just implementing the time scale, because I had never done that before. So it's time scale, working with time, whatever. I figured that out. Let's see if it says anything here. No, that was before this. So okay, 6 p.m. I had implemented like a very basic prototype that was basically just time scale, and I had plotted the points, plotted the events in their correct X location, and that was basically all I had. I implemented scrolling at one point. Do I say here? Yeah, so I probably implemented scrolling before that. So scrolling and just a normal default scale were the first things I figured out. Or not, I keep saying scrolling, I mean zooming and translating and all that stuff. And then what did I do? So after that, I changed data sets to this thing, which had multiple teams and a ton of players and different kinds of events, including, this is good because Sad Jr. actually, Sad Jr. leaves, let's see what happens. Sad Jr. leaves iBuyPower and, or just kidding, what the hell? Leaves iBuyPower and joins, he does something, he switches between the teams. I should know this history. At one point, I would have known this history so well, but I don't anymore. But okay, so at this point, Sad Jr. leaves iBuyPower, and later on, he joins. Geez, why don't I have this? He must have been on Energy at some point, right? Or to leave later. Sad Jr. New team. Okay, so he joins Cosmic Energy, leaves April 1st, and then why don't I have him joining Energy? I just have him leaving Energy, so clearly I left out some data. But my point is, Sad Jr. crosses over the teams, so that's like, that's a real world use case that I want to test out. That's kind of cool to have. So whatever, a much better data set. So after I had this data set, I went through and at first nothing changed appearance wise, but I spent a lot of time getting this thing working. So what this is instead of just rendering all the points, just derp as they are, they're separated into groups. And I mean, eventually you can see what I do with the groups, but at first it's just empty groups. But I'm just rendering them in groups, right, separating them out properly. And there's a few tricky things here. So for example, groups that are org changes, so the team carries over, so you change the team name, but you don't want to change the position, so the row, that carries over. But also, sometimes team names get reused. So if Kings of Urban is here and they become NRG, there's a possibility that a different team is going to take up Kings of Urban, the name again, and that's a different team. So that's something I haven't fully handled, but I do have org changes worked out so that it pushes all events later with the same name after an org change to later on. So unless this NRG Esports directly org changes back to Kings of Urban, it'll actually generate that, or it has the potential to generate that as a new line, which is what it should do. But okay, so that's the bulk of the time is just getting that to work. So org change, that was huge, right? So 7:38 I had my data, 8:31, so like an hour later I had made cycling through it work, and then 11:39, so a couple of hours after that, maybe with an hour of chess in between, but a couple of hours after that I finally got org change to fully work and then to implement the groups properly. So after that, it wasn't too long. I mean, it took me an hour took me an hour, but it wasn't technically too difficult. It was just kind of thinking through it to get like I would say that this is like a little bit. This is technically kind of hard because I was writing a big function, and I was having lots of just debugging problems and all the things, which is why I have like this huge console output, and I actually learned how to color these things, which is really helpful. So I'm not just so I can find my place in this wall of text. But I was getting an infinite loop, and it just crashed the page, right? And that was because there were a few reasons. I just had like stuff badly written. I was originally using a for loop and replaced it with a function, but I was initially passing a thing in as event list, and event list is referenced. But the thing I was passing in was named next events, right? So, but the thing is, when I push next events, when I push something into next events, it would update event list, because I guess event list was still attached. It was still pointing to next events, and somehow this next event was also pointing to next events. So what ended up happening was this list right here, where I'm cycling through event list, it just kept getting longer and longer and longer, right? Because it just kept pushing stuff to here, and that resulted in an infinite loop. And it took me a little bit. Like I just had a console log with literally everything to try and figure out what was going wrong, because it seemed, I don't know, like if you don't figure out that like this is still linked to the old one, it's just baffling what's happening, right? But eventually, this was the thing that saved me. Was printing bum of length, and I just saw the length increase, and I was like, what is going on? But that was the right path, and I figured out what was causing the problem from there and fixed it. And it took me a few hours, but I made it work, and I'm quite happy with it. So, okay, and then after I implemented the rectangles, the last thing was just making them scale, which is what I did basically here, function zoom, right? Before it was just this code. This is just for the points. And then for the rectangles and the text, because their generation is a little more complex, because I have to reference where the point is and also pass in the transfer date if it's a transferred org, it's a little more complex, but I managed to make it work. And some parts of this, honestly, are just like D3 is just amazing. Like I can select these and the data is still binded to them. So I can just bind this, this D right here is literally just, all that it's referring to is the start date. Right, because there's no node there, but you still want it to start there. So that's all that it's referring to, but it's binded on. So if you select it later, you can straight up just access it and do that on it. So it's really amazing. D3 it's really wonderful. Like I can't imagine, like, well, I don't know. It's really nice. Okay, so what's next? So right now I've built this basic thing. Teams and their layout are, it needs styling, but as far as D3, it's there, right? It's generating properly, it's stacking properly, it's scaling properly. The next thing will be implementing actually getting the players to show up properly. So these dots are all in a line right now. They're just events, but next they'll be like drawing paths for players, right? So figuring out like what a player is doing at any time and drawing paths like as they make their way through, all that kind of stuff, right? So that'll be the next thing to do. Maybe I'll even put like an LFT in or a retired up there. That would be kind of cool. But that'll be, that's the meat of it, right? That's what matters. And I hope that this setup will allow me to really work on the player stuff without changing too much. One thing is that I will probably have to change even this, like the team layouting stuff, because it's, well, for one thing, I want it to be interactive, which is gonna, overturn all of this, right? Right now it's generating really nicely in time order, but eventually I want it to swap around crazily, so we'll see how that goes. This is just a starting point, but even if I didn't want that, right? Just time order, like you imagine like hundreds of teams, you don't want it in time order, right? Like G2 is going to be here. G2 is literally not going to change. Wait, this is true. G2 is literally going to stay on the first column, right? But there's still a competitive team. You're going to want to see G2 next to, what's new? I don't know. You like Dignitas. Dignitas isn't that new, but what's a new team? I don't know. Charlotte Phoenix, or what's a more RLCS team? I don't know. Whatever. Like you get my point. Like you want to see G2 Esports alongside newer teams, and you don't want them to be literally on opposite ends. So this will probably have to be changed, but for now it's a good starting point. Players will be will be a lot to work with, but it'll be really cool. It'll be really fun. So yeah, this is what I've done today. This is 7 hours of work time. Admittedly, with and I worked on this earlier today too. If we look at my commits, 9 hours ago I started working on it, but also, whatever. I basically spent today working on it. But it's just a fun project. I'm learning as I'm doing it. I don't know how I feel about my efficiency working on programming. I feel like it has a tendency to drag and to not maybe it probably could be a lot more efficient, but yeah, whatever. I learned a lot today, and I'm just improving my D3 skills. Right, when I get a lot better at them, I can just bash out quickly, like I can with WordPress. I'm a little faster with WordPress, but even then, like I don't know, like Flippy and stuff, it would take me a while. But whatever. I guess that's why developers get paid, right? So I don't know. I'm also not documenting this super well. Like this is the best documentation I have. But yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of fun. I'm learning a lot. I find a lot of this really cool. And obviously I care a lot about this project too. Like seeing this laid out in time, right? This is really cool. And when I get like RLCS results and stuff, yeah, I have all sorts of ideas. This could be really cool, just as a personal project. Even if nobody else cares about it, I'll be really proud. Like it'll be a cool portfolio piece as well. So yeah, that's this part dev diary, part introduction to this project and why I care about it and what I want to do with it. I'm not sure what I'll do with this video. Maybe I'll cut it up later and put it into a dev diary. But it'll just be good to have this footage. So yeah.